is Sperr.
And I'm Damato.
And we are representing Loyola University Chicago. So when we started preparing for this competition, we had a very large bike sharing data set for Chicago, and we were exploring various trends, age and gender, seasonality, even looking into tourists versus commuters who use this bike sharing. But the most impactful trend that we found was that bike sharing ride trends reflect the socioeconomic inequality as the city of Chicago. To visualize this, the image on the right gives an indication of this divide. The light yellow areas represent low-income zip codes, predominantly on the west and south sides. The blue and green areas, the downtown and north sides, are the higher income, more affluent zip codes. When we overlay the heat map of ride trends and concentration, you can see that the highest concentration of rides occurs in the downtown area. This makes sense for tourism or business commuters, but then also the north side has a very high concentration of rides compared to the west and south sides, those low-income areas. To get a better understanding of how these stations were being used, we ran k-means clustering in R using non-location attributes. And even though we used attributes that had no geographical meaning, we still saw the clusters split into 4 clear geographical groupings. The most underutilized group, represented in blue, is located predominantly on the south side, one of the lower income areas. So we started thinking, what's the connection here? What kind of barriers might exist in these low-income areas that these riders are not using bike sharing? What kind of initiatives could be used to overcome these barriers and create a more equitable city? And what we found was that bike sharing data, a seemingly unconventional data set for socioeconomic issues, provided a lot of really impactful insights. The data that we used was Divvy data. Divvy is the sole bike sharing company in Chicago. There were 17 million ride records in that data from 2013 to 2018. And we supplemented that with US Census data and Chicago City data for population and poverty levels in the different zip codes. And then we ran our analytics through PostgreSQL, RStudio, and Tableau for both visualizations and analytics.
So in our approach to this all, we looked at a variety of different potential barriers to this. What could be causing these problems? We looked at crime, we looked at labor, but we wanted to keep the scope of our analysis as focused as possible. And we narrowed it down to the 3 categories that we found could provide the most actionable insights, namely cost, resource availability, and time limit. So to start off, we looked into the resources. The first visualization here shows a map of Chicago like you saw previously, but this time it's overlaid with stations and the number of rides per stations. So the obvious assumption here would be that the lower income areas have less stations, and therefore an increase of stations would increase the number of rides. The visualization shows the gold represents the downtown areas of Chicago, which we mentioned are more affluent, and the north side as well in blue, with the far south and west sides in red, the less affluent areas. The dots represent the number of stations, and the size of the circles represents the number of rides per station. As you can see, from 2013 to 2018, the red number of stations increases significantly, but the size of those stations stays relatively the same. We explored this in another visualization, which shows essentially the same thing. This time, the colors are the same, but you have the count of stations per zip code on the x-axis and the number of rides per station on y. Once again, you can see that red, the low-income areas, kind of moves along the x-axis, but the number of rides on the y does not seem to increase in any significant way. So this is actually kind of counterintuitive. Increasing the number of stations in the low-income areas did not increase the number of rides. But why? Next, we looked into price to see if we could come up with any kind of solution. So Divvy subscriptions cost $99 a year. So the assumption here would be that low-income areas have more individuals who can't afford those subscriptions. So maybe a decrease in price would then increase ridership. Divvy caught on to this too, and they launched Divvy for Everyone in July 2015, which brought the $99 subscription down to $5 a year, with a gradual increase across 4 years to cap out at $75. Now, this was implemented in July 2015, which you can see on the visualization, and there's really no significant spike there. And this is comparing the lowest income group with a higher income group in the city on number of rides throughout the years. And if anything, as the program went on, the gap, the gross disparity between these 2 classes and the number of rides actually grew more. So, once again, counterintuitive, the number number of riders in these areas did not increase with a decrease in price. Finally, we decided to look at time limit. Low-income areas have less concentration of stations, and therefore they're more likely to go over the allotted time limits of divvy and suffer overage charges. So divvy for customers allows a 30-minute ride before you are subject to any overage charges, and for subscribers is 45 minutes. In this visualization, we only looked at customers, and you can see in red, the lowest income group is averaging over an hour per ride, which is more than double any other group, and it does result in pretty severe overage charges. And something we found here is that the other groups in blue also happen to be, on average, over the time limit as well. So while we found many useful analysis, many insights in our analysis, perhaps the least surprising thing we found was that Chicagoans do have no concept of time. In this case, yes, the customers in low-income areas did have longer trip durations on average. So looking at all these barriers, whether the assumption you would make is correct or not, it still proves valuable insights. Now, one thing we've been thinking about is that Chicago is a city where the economic divide is so deep that you can see it in something even as unexpected as bike data. So maybe we can utilize this in the city of Chicago, and we can start a trend of looking into more unconventional data sets, not just food stamps for poverty, looking at things like bike data and things that nobody would expect, because it turns out it provides just as useful information. Another takeaway from this is that sometimes an isolated approach does not prove a solution, so it's more of a holistic solution you need, combining all of these efforts to come up with a difference. Somebody at Divvy must have been looking over our shoulders while we were working on this project and stealing all of our ideas, because after we started, they started implementing Southside tours on the city of Chicago, adult bike lessons, and now I'm sure you've all seen those scooters everywhere. Chicago just started doing their tests of those, and Damato bikes. Maybe with all these initiatives coming in, and just the idea that these unconventional solutions can provide a blueprint for solving the economic divide in Chicago, maybe we can then take Chicago as a blueprint for other cities across the nation to follow. Thank you.